The air in the industrial district always hung heavy, a perpetual twilight cast by the towering smokestacks that pierced the bruised sky. For Cale, born into this landscape of iron and ash, the world was a symphony of grinding gears and distant, mournful whistles. His home, a cramped apartment in a crumbling tenement, offered little respite from the pervasive scarcity that defined their existence. Every meal was a testament to his mother's tireless efforts, every worn garment a symbol of his father's relentless toil in the factories. They were good people, honest and hard-working, yet prosperity remained an elusive dream, a whispered myth from a world beyond their reach. From a young age, Cale possessed an unusual stillness, an almost preternatural ability to observe. While other children chased fleeting joys in the grimy streets, he watched. He saw the subtle shifts in his father's weary eyes, the forced cheerfulness in his mother's voice. He noticed the stark contrast between the dilapidated buildings of his neighborhood and the gleaming, distant towers of the city center, visible only on the clearest days. He absorbed the unspoken lessons of their struggle, the constant vigilance required to make ends meet, the quiet dignity in enduring hardship, and the crushing weight of a system that seemed designed to keep them tethered to the ground. One biting winter afternoon, a seemingly small incident etched itself deep into Cale's memory, igniting a spark that would define his future. His younger sister, frail and often ill, had cherished a small, hand-carved wooden bird, a gift from their ailing grandmother. It was her most prized possession, a fragile symbol of hope in their bleak world. One day, during a particularly harsh storm, a gust of wind tore through their poorly maintained window, sending the bird tumbling into a deep, inaccessible drain. Cale, then barely 8, watched his sister's heartbroken sobs, a raw, visceral pain twisting in his own chest. He tried everything: sticks, string, even risking his small hand in the icy water, but the bird was lost. That night, huddled under thin blankets, the image of his sister's tear-streaked face haunted him. It wasn't just about a lost toy, it was about the helplessness, the lack of control over their own lives, the constant vulnerability to external forces. He realized then that their poverty wasn't just a lack of money, it was a lack of agency, a perpetual state of being at the mercy of circumstances. A fierce, quiet resolve began to harden within him. He vowed that he would never again feel so powerless. He would understand the mechanisms of the world, master them, and build a life where he, and those he cared for, would be secure, shielded from the arbitrary cruelties of fate. This nascent ambition, born from a child's grief and a deep-seated desire for control, became the silent engine of his young life. He began to approach every task, no matter how small, with a newfound discipline, meticulously observing, planning, and executing, laying the invisible groundwork for the resilience that would define his extraordinary ascent. The incident with his sister's wooden bird had ignited a fire within Cale, a burning desire not just for security, but for understanding. He realized that to control his destiny, he first needed to comprehend the intricate machinery of the world. Formal schooling, while a necessity, quickly proved insufficient for his voracious appetite. The rote memorization and rigid curricula felt like shackles, designed to produce compliant workers rather than independent thinkers. He excelled effortlessly, but his mind yearned for more, for the deeper currents of history, philosophy, and economics that shaped societies. His true education began in the district's small, dimly lit public library. It was a sanctuary, a quiet haven filled with the whispers of countless voices from across time and space. Cale devoured books with an almost desperate intensity, his small hands tracing lines of text on worn pages. He read about ancient empires and their rise and fall, about the strategies of legendary generals, the philosophies of great thinkers, and the intricate dance of markets and trade. He taught himself rudimentary economics, political theory, and even the basics of engineering, driven by an insatiable curiosity and the conviction that knowledge was the ultimate leverage. It was in this library that he encountered Silas, an elderly, retired history professor who volunteered his time shelving books. Silas, with his keen eyes and gentle demeanor, quickly noticed the boy who spent more time in the non-fiction section than any adult. Their conversations began tentatively, then blossomed into profound discussions. Silas, recognizing Cale's extraordinary intellect and ambition, became his informal mentor. He didn't just provide answers. He taught Cale how to ask better questions, how to dissect complex problems, and how to see patterns where others saw chaos. Silas introduced Cale to the concept of strategic thinking, explaining how historical figures didn't just react to events, but actively shaped them through foresight and calculated moves. He spoke of the importance of long-term vision, urging Cale to look beyond immediate gains and consider the ripple effects of every decision. He challenged Cale to analyze the power structures of their own city, to understand the invisible threads that connected industry, government, and community. Cale learned that true power wasn't just brute force, but the ability to influence, to anticipate, and to orchestrate. This mentorship was transformative. Cale began to view his impoverished surroundings not as a prison, but as a complex system, a microcosm of the larger world. He analyzed the local power dynamics, the flow of goods, the unspoken rules that governed their lives. He started to connect the dots between the grand historical narratives Silas shared and the everyday struggles of his community. He realized that knowledge wasn't just about accumulating information, it was about understanding its application, about discerning the underlying principles that govern success and failure. This profound investment in himself, this relentless pursuit of knowledge, became the bedrock of his burgeoning long-term vision and his innate understanding of strategy, laying the intellectual foundation for the extraordinary path he was destined to carve. Armed with a mind sharpened by Silas's tutelage and an unyielding will, Cale stepped into the world beyond the library's quiet walls. His formal education, though completed with distinction, offered few direct pathways from his district. He took a modest position as a logistics assistant in a sprawling, somewhat chaotic local distribution company, a cog in a vast, inefficient machine. Most saw it as a dead-end job, a means to an end. Cale saw it as a new classroom, a living laboratory where the theories he'd absorbed could be tested against the gritty realities of commerce. He didn't just perform his assigned tasks, he observed. He watched the flow of goods, the bottlenecks in communication, the wasted movements, and the missed connections. He saw the company hemorrhaging resources through sheer inertia and outdated practices. While others complained or simply accepted the status quo, Cale began to mentally map out improvements, sketching diagrams of optimized routes and streamlined processes during his lunch breaks. His colleagues found his intensity unusual, his quiet focus almost unnerving, but his superiors, buried under mountains of paperwork, barely noticed the new, unassuming assistant. His first real opportunity arose from a crisis. A major shipment, vital for a large client, was misrouted, threatening to incur significant penalties and damage the company's already fragile reputation. Panic rippled through the department. Managers barked orders, but no one seemed to have a clear solution. Cale, who had meticulously studied the company's entire logistics network in his spare time, stepped forward with a quiet confidence that belied his youth. He presented a detailed, albeit unconventional, plan to reroute the shipment using a combination of underutilized local transport and a daring overnight transfer through a less-traveled route. His immediate supervisor, skeptical but desperate, reluctantly gave him the green light. Cale, working through the night, coordinated the intricate dance of vehicles and personnel, communicating with a clarity and authority that surprised everyone. He didn't just manage the crisis, he transformed it. The shipment arrived not only on time but with minimal additional cost, saving the company from a costly blunder and earning the clients unexpected praise. It was a small victory in the grand scheme, but for Cale, it was a profound validation. This incident wasn't just about problem-solving, it was about demonstrating initiative and the capacity to add value where others saw only obstacles. It showed that true worth wasn't tied to a job title but to the ability to deliver results. His self-confidence, once a quiet internal flame, now flickered brighter, fueled by the tangible proof of his capabilities. He had taken his first deliberate step from the shadows of his childhood into the arena where ambition could be forged into reality, understanding that every challenge was merely an opportunity disguised, waiting for someone with the vision and courage to seize it. Cale's success with the misrouted shipment was a quiet ripple that soon became a noticeable current within the company. He was promoted, his responsibilities expanding beyond mere logistics to include operational oversight. Yet, he quickly understood that formal titles were merely badges. True power resided in the intricate web of relationships and influence. He began to play a different kind of game, one he had studied in Silas's history books. The game of chess, where every move was calculated, every player a piece on a larger board. He didn't seek out the most powerful figures directly, but rather those who were overlooked, those with specialized knowledge or untapped potential. He spent hours in the break rooms, not gossiping, but listening. He learned about the frustrations of the warehouse foreman, the innovative ideas of a junior engineer, the quiet influence of a long-serving administrative assistant. He offered solutions, connected people, and subtly demonstrated his value, not just as an employee, but as a facilitator. This was his nascent approach to building alliances, understanding that collective strength far surpassed individual effort. A significant challenge soon emerged, threatening to engulf the entire region. A sudden, unexpected shift in trade policies, coupled with a natural disaster that crippled key infrastructure, plunged the local economy into chaos. Supply chains fractured, businesses faltered, and panic began to spread. The company, like many others, faced imminent collapse. Most leaders saw only insurmountable obstacles, a cascade of losses and inevitable failure. Cale, however, saw a distorted reflection of the historical crises he had studied. He recognized the patterns of disruption and the opportunities they presented for those with the foresight to adapt. He convened an informal council of the individuals he had quietly cultivated, the resourceful foreman, the innovative engineer, the well-connected assistant, and a few others who trusted his judgment. He presented a bold, almost audacious plan to pivot the company's resources, temporarily abandoning traditional markets and instead focusing on emergency relief logistics, leveraging their existing infrastructure to fill the critical void left by the crisis. It was a massive risk, requiring swift action and an almost complete overhaul of their operations. But Cale's carefully constructed network, built on mutual respect and shared vision, rallied behind him. He demonstrated exceptional leadership, inspiring confidence and orchestrating a complex transformation. He meticulously mapped out new routes, negotiated with local authorities for priority access, and even secured temporary partnerships with smaller, agile transport companies. He transformed the company from a victim of circumstance into a vital lifeline for the struggling region. This period was a masterclass in adaptability and turning crises into opportunities. Cale didn't just mitigate damage, he repositioned the company, earning immense goodwill and forging new, invaluable connections. He proved that in times of upheaval, the greatest rewards often went to those who could see beyond the immediate despair, who possessed the strategic vision to innovate and the courage to execute, fundamentally altering the trajectory of his career and the fortunes of those who believed in him. Cale's audacious success in navigating the regional crisis had not gone unnoticed. His reputation soared, not just within the company, but across the wider network of businesses and local authorities. He was seen as a visionary, a problem solver, and a leader capable of turning adversity into advantage. This rapid ascent, however, cast long shadows. His innovative approaches and growing influence began to threaten established interests, particularly those of a senior executive, a man named Valerius, who had initially championed Cale but now saw him as a rival. Valerius, a master of corporate politics, was a man of immense charm and cunning. He had been instrumental in Cale's early promotions, recognizing his talent but underestimating his ambition. As Cale's star rose, Valerius's carefully constructed edifice of power began to show cracks. He couldn't openly challenge Cale's competence, as the results spoke for themselves. Instead, he chose a more insidious path: betrayal. The opportunity arose during a critical negotiation for a lucrative long-term contract, one that Cale had meticulously prepared for, assembling a comprehensive strategy and cultivating key relationships. Valerius, feigning support, subtly undermined Cale's efforts, leaking sensitive information to competitors and planting seeds of doubt about Cale's loyalty and judgment among the decision-makers. The betrayal was swift and devastating. Cale found himself blindsided, his carefully laid plans unraveling, culminating in the loss of the contract and a public reprimand that stripped him of his expanded responsibilities, effectively marginalizing him within the company. The blow was profound. For the first time, Cale felt the bitter taste of defeat, not from external forces, but from within his own ranks. The initial shock gave way to a searing anger, then a cold, analytical resolve. He retreated, not in despair, but in deep contemplation. He replayed every interaction, every conversation, every subtle glance, dissecting Valerius's motives and methods. He realized that his focus on external strategy had blinded him to the internal machinations of power, to the human element of envy and insecurity. This period of forced introspection became a crucible for his character. He understood that resilience wasn't merely about bouncing back from external setbacks, but about enduring the deep wounds of human treachery and emerging stronger. He learned a harsh but invaluable lesson about the true nature of power. It wasn't just about vision and execution, but also about understanding the dark undercurrents of ambition and the necessity of guarding against those who would exploit trust. He didn't seek immediate revenge. Instead, he used the experience to refine his understanding of human psychology and political maneuvering. He began to meticulously plan his next move, not with anger, but with a cold, calculated precision. His determination hardened, his strategic mind now encompassing the unpredictable complexities of human nature. This setback, rather than breaking him, forged a new layer of impenetrable resolve, preparing him for battles far greater than any he had yet faced. Cale's marginalization, intended to crush his spirit, instead became a period of profound strategic recalibration. He didn't rail against the injustice or seek immediate confrontation. Instead, he embraced the quietude, using his reduced responsibilities as an opportunity to observe from the periphery, a vantage point that offered a clearer view of the company's internal landscape. Valerius, now basking in his perceived victory, grew complacent, his ambition unchecked by Cale's presence. He made a series of rash decisions, driven by ego rather than sound judgment, creating new vulnerabilities within the organization that only Cale, with his deep understanding of its operational intricacies, could fully perceive. Cale spent his days meticulously analyzing market trends, competitor strategies, and the internal politics that now governed the company. He cultivated relationships with those who felt disenfranchised by Valerius's heavy-handed leadership, not openly, but through subtle gestures of support and shared insights. He understood that true influence wasn't always about direct power, but about the strategic deployment of information and the cultivation of trust. This period was a testament to strategic patience, a quiet accumulation of knowledge and goodwill, waiting for the opportune moment. The moment arrived with a new, complex regulatory challenge that threatened to cripple the company's core operations. Valerius, having alienated many key personnel and lacking Cale's holistic understanding of the business, found himself overwhelmed. His attempts to navigate the crisis were clumsy and ineffective, pushing the company to the brink of severe penalties and public scrutiny. Panic began to spread through the executive ranks, and the board, increasingly concerned, started looking for alternatives. It was then that Cale, without fanfare, presented a comprehensive, meticulously researched plan to address the regulatory issues. His proposal wasn't just a solution, it was a masterclass in impeccable execution, outlining not only the necessary steps but also anticipating potential pitfalls and offering contingency plans. He had not only identified the problem but had already laid the groundwork for its resolution, leveraging the informal network he had quietly built. His approach was calm, authoritative, and devoid of any hint of personal vindictiveness, focusing solely on the company's survival and future. The board, desperate for a clear path forward, recognized the strategic brilliance and foresight in Cale's plan. They reinstated him, not just to his previous position, but with expanded authority to oversee the entire regulatory compliance division. Cale's return was not a forceful takeover, but a strategic re-entry, orchestrated through superior intellect and preparation. He demonstrated that negotiation and influence, when backed by undeniable competence and a clear vision, could be far more potent than brute force or political maneuvering. He had not only reclaimed his standing but had done so on his own terms, proving that setbacks were merely detours, not dead ends, for those with the resilience and strategic acumen to navigate them. Cale's strategic return was not merely a personal triumph, it was a demonstration of a new paradigm of leadership. Having successfully navigated the regulatory crisis and restored stability, he was elevated to a position of unprecedented influence, overseeing not just a division, but a significant portion of the company's strategic operations. This new platform allowed him to expand his vision beyond the immediate concerns of the organization, to consider its role within the broader economic and social fabric of the region. He understood that true power was not just about control, but about the capacity to effect widespread positive change. His first major initiative was a bold, multifaceted plan to revitalize the very industrial district where he had grown up. It was a project that many deemed impossible, too costly, too entrenched in decades of neglect. But Cale, armed with his intimate knowledge of the area's potential and his now proven ability to mobilize resources, saw it as an essential step towards sustainable growth. He envisioned modernizing infrastructure, investing in new technologies, and creating educational programs to re-skill the workforce. He faced fierce opposition from established interests who benefited from the status quo, and from cynics who saw only the enormity of the task. Yet, Cale's vision was infectious. He didn't just present spreadsheets and projections, he articulated a future, a narrative of hope and prosperity that resonated deeply with the community. He meticulously built coalitions, bringing together local leaders, engineers, investors, and even former adversaries who, seeing the undeniable logic and potential of his plan, reluctantly lent their support. He demonstrated a masterful command of resource management, securing funding from diverse sources and optimizing every aspect of the project. He was also a keen practitioner of delegation, empowering competent individuals and holding them accountable, fostering a sense of shared ownership and purpose. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. Old factories were repurposed, new industries began to emerge, and the once desolate streets buzzed with renewed activity. Cale's leadership was characterized by an unwavering focus on the long term, a refusal to be swayed by short-term gains or political expediency. He understood that building something truly enduring required patience, persistence, and an unshakable belief in the potential of collective effort. He was no longer just a manager, he was an architect of destiny, shaping the very landscape of his world. This period solidified Cale's reputation as a transformative leader. He had not only consolidated his power but had used it to uplift an entire community, proving that effective management and a long-term vision were not just abstract concepts but powerful tools for real-world change. He had faced down entrenched opposition and overcome immense logistical hurdles, all while inspiring a diverse group of stakeholders to work towards a common, ambitious goal. The lessons of his childhood, of scarcity and the yearning for control, had evolved into a profound understanding of how to build, sustain, and expand prosperity on a grand scale, demonstrating that true leadership lies in the ability to inspire and mobilize others towards a shared, brighter future. With the industrial district revitalized and his influence firmly established, Cale stood at the pinnacle of his ambition. He commanded respect, wielded immense resources, and his decisions now impacted not just a company, but the lives of thousands across the burgeoning region. Yet, this extraordinary power came with an equally extraordinary burden. The cinematic sweep of his rise had given way to the stark, often lonely, reality of leadership. The moral dilemmas were no longer theoretical exercises from Silas's books. They were raw, immediate, and demanded choices that often had no clear right answer. One such dilemma arose during the expansion of a crucial infrastructure project. To secure the necessary land, a small, historic community, resistant to relocation, stood in the path of progress. Cale knew the project would bring unprecedented economic benefits to the wider region, creating jobs and improving living standards for countless families. But it would also mean displacing people from their ancestral homes, severing ties to a heritage they cherished. He spent sleepless nights weighing the collective good against individual suffering, the cold logic of progress against the warmth of tradition. The decision, when it came, was agonizing, a testament to the heavy cost of responsibility at the highest levels. He ensured fair compensation and new housing, but the echoes of their sorrow lingered, a constant reminder of the human price of his vision. The personal sacrifices were equally profound. His relentless dedication to his mission had created an ever-widening chasm between him and the few personal relationships he had managed to cultivate. His sister, once his closest confidant, found him increasingly distant, consumed by the demands of his role. Old friends, who had shared his humble beginnings, now saw him as an unreachable figure, a man whose world was too vast and complex for them to comprehend. The quiet evenings he once cherished, filled with simple conversations, were replaced by endless meetings, strategic analyses, and the constant vigilance required to maintain his position. The solitude of power became a pervasive companion. He was surrounded by advisors, allies, and subordinates, yet truly alone in the burden of ultimate decision-making. Every word was weighed, every gesture scrutinized. The easy camaraderie of his earlier days was a distant memory, replaced by a guarded formality. He understood that this was the inevitable consequence of his ambition, the unspoken contract of leadership. He had sought control, and he had achieved it, but the cost was a profound isolation, a constant awareness that the fate of many rested on his shoulders, leaving little room for the vulnerabilities of personal connection. This period taught Cale that the true measure of power was not in its acquisition, but in its ethical application. It was a crucible that tested his integrity, forcing him to confront the uncomfortable truths about his own ambition. He learned that while wealth and influence could build empires, they could also erode the very foundations of human connection. The price of leadership, he discovered, was paid not just in effort and strategy, but in the quiet, often painful sacrifices of the heart, a stark reminder that even at the zenith of success, the human spirit grapples with profound and enduring challenges. Having grappled with the profound personal costs of his ascent, Cale, now a figure of almost mythical stature, turned his gaze from the immediate demands of power to the distant horizon of history. He had built an empire of influence, transformed a region, and navigated the treacherous currents of ambition and betrayal. Yet, he understood that true prosperity, the kind that transcended individual achievement, lay not in accumulation, but in enduring impact. His focus shifted from merely leading to actively shaping the future, from managing the present to architecting a legacy that would outlive him. He initiated projects of unprecedented scale and vision, endeavors that aimed to fundamentally redefine the region's place in the world. These were not merely economic ventures, they were societal transformations. He championed a vast educational reform, establishing institutions that would nurture future generations of innovators and thinkers, ensuring that the opportunities he had fought for would be accessible to all. He invested heavily in sustainable energy, envisioning a future where the industrial district, once choked by smoke, would be a beacon of ecological responsibility. He understood that true success was not measured by the size of his personal fortune, but by the health and vitality of the society he left behind. His approach to these grand designs was characterized by an almost prophetic foresight. He didn't just solve problems, he anticipated them, building systems and structures designed to withstand the inevitable shifts of time and circumstance. He meticulously studied global trends, technological advancements, and demographic changes, weaving them into a cohesive strategy for long-term resilience. He fostered a culture of innovation and continuous improvement, knowing that stagnation was the silent killer of any great endeavor. He was no longer just a leader, he was a steward of the future, constantly asking himself, "How will this endure? How will this benefit those who come after me?" However, even at the zenith of his influence, a final, formidable challenge emerged, one that threatened to unravel the very fabric of his life's work. A global economic downturn, coupled with a resurgence of old rivalries and ideological divides, created a storm of instability that threatened to engulf his carefully constructed world. It was a crisis of a different magnitude, one that demanded not just strategic brilliance, but profound wisdom and an unshakable moral compass. The foundations he had laid were strong, but the external pressures were immense, testing the limits of his foresight and the resilience of his institutions. Cale faced this ultimate test not with panic, but with a quiet resolve born of decades of struggle and triumph. He rallied his most trusted allies, drawing upon the deep well of experience and loyalty he had cultivated. He demonstrated that the ultimate measure of a leader was not in avoiding challenges, but in confronting them with courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to the greater good. His legacy was not yet complete, and this final crucible would determine its true strength, proving that even the most powerful visions require constant vigilance and an enduring spirit to stand the test of time. Years had passed since the global storm had threatened to dismantle Cale's life's work. He had weathered it, as he had weathered every challenge before, not through brute force, but through the enduring strength of the systems he had built, the alliances he had forged, and the collective spirit he had inspired. Now, an elder statesman, his hair silvered and his face etched with the lines of countless battles won and lessons learned, Cale often found himself in quiet contemplation, gazing out over the revitalized district that had once been his humble beginning. The towering smokestacks were gone, replaced by gleaming structures of innovation and verdant parks. The air was clean, the streets vibrant, and the laughter of children echoed where once only the grind of industry had prevailed. He had achieved everything he had set out to do, and more. The security he craved as a child, the control he sought over his destiny, had manifested in an influence that spanned continents. He had built institutions, fostered prosperity, and left an indelible mark on the world. Yet, in these moments of quiet reflection, the triumphs often felt less significant than the echoes of the journey itself. He remembered the sting of his sister's tears over a lost wooden bird, the quiet wisdom of Silas, the bitter taste of betrayal, and the profound solitude that often accompanied the highest echelons of power. The true meaning of his ascent, he realized, was not in the accumulation of wealth or the exercise of power, but in the impact he had created. The prosperity he had championed was not merely economic, it was a prosperity of opportunity, of education, of dignity for those who had once known only scarcity. He had learned that while ambition could drive one to extraordinary heights, it was purpose that gave those heights meaning. The relentless pursuit of control, born from childhood helplessness, had evolved into a profound understanding of stewardship, of nurturing the potential in others. He had paid a price, undoubtedly. The personal connections, the simple joys, had often been sacrificed on the altar of his grand vision. He carried the weight of difficult decisions, the memory of those he had inadvertently hurt, and the constant awareness of the immense responsibility he bore. But he also carried the quiet satisfaction of seeing his vision take root, of witnessing generations thrive in a world he had helped to shape. The balance between ambition and humanity, between power and compassion, was a delicate one, constantly shifting, constantly demanding reassessment. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the city he had transformed, Cale understood that true wealth was not just what one possessed, but what one contributed. True power was not just what one commanded, but what one enabled. And true ambition, when tempered by wisdom and guided by purpose, could indeed build a better world, but it would always demand a profound reckoning with the self. His journey was a testament to the idea that while the path to prosperity is paved with discipline, strategy, and resilience, its ultimate reward lies in the legacy of positive change and the quiet, enduring echo of a life lived with profound intent. It was a message not of easy riches, but of the profound, often challenging, yet ultimately rewarding journey of building something truly meaningful.